Hello and welcome to DC Velocity's Thought Leader series, produced in conjunction with MHI. My name is Mark Solomon. I'm senior editor at DC Velocity magazine. Today we are pleased to be joined by Dwight Klappich. He is research vice president at the well-known consultancy Gartner, Inc., based in Atlanta. Dwight has been at Gartner for 14 and a half years. His focus is on logistics technology and to the extent the role that technology can play in improving a company's supply chain operations. So Dwight, thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you, Mark. Thanks for having me.
I guess we could go into what you're seeing out there in the market for technology, the ability of organizations to have people on board to manage it, to move it forward. What are you seeing out there?
Oh, great question. I mean, first off, we see high demand. Again, I've been with Gartner for 14 and a half years, and we just haven't seen the level of interest in, warehousing and transportation, technologies that we see today. I think we see things like multi-channel commerce, for example, driving a lot of interest in people upgrading their systems. It's a good point. We don't, from a technology standpoint, we haven't seen talent issues as much in terms of, supporting these, systems at this point in time. But I mean, certainly the demand stays where it's going to be. I think we might see that over the next couple of years.
So you don't see a shortage or an imbalance in the supply-demand equation?
We haven't up to now. I think what's been interesting, it's largely been driven by Oracle and SAP becoming bigger players in this space, is heretofore we hadn't seen the big consultancies really get involved. But since they've already had large practices around SAP and Oracle, we're starting to see the big consulting companies get a real interest. Certainly, they're looking for new things to do. And so we've seen them expanding, but it's not just going to benefit SAP and Oracle. We think a lot of the vendors, whether that's JDA or Manhattan, now having that extra capacity is going to be beneficial overall.
There's been a lot of exposure given to new technologies, whether they be smartphones or tablets or 3D printing. Where is the new technology taking us? How mature is it, and how much are we in the early stages of an IT revolution as it applies to the supply chain?
Well, I think there's evolutionary change is revolution. Let me start with the evolutionary. I think, you bring up a great point about tablets and smart devices. We've long had mobile technology in warehousing, for example, or even in transportation. But these have tended to be kind of, expensive, not very elegant devices. They're rugged, but they weren't very elegant. We're seeing a lot of interest now with tablets, say, in warehousing. Not so much for the blue-collar worker, but for the supervisory staff, that now they can have all of their analytics and performance management information on a mobile device, so they can be out on the shop floor. They don't have to go back to their desk. We can get alerts. They can get to see how they're doing, or their bottlenecks, things they need to respond to. So we've seen marked increase in interest in tablets for that, or even smartphones. We see some interest in smartphones for the traditional, fork truck driver, picker kind of stuff. But I think that's fairly nascent. See some prototyping, but I think we're going to see that start to take off, because the price differentials between the ruggedized devices and, say, an iTouch such that I could buy a lot of iTouches. So I think we're going to see some of that. But at that point, we haven't seen as much activity right there. The other thing, the revolution, I think that's where it's exciting. I mean, there is so much on the horizon. You mentioned 3D printing. It's just offering opportunities to create whole new businesses. I mean, Nike talking about doing 3D printed shoes. NASA putting 3D printers on the space station instead of holding service parts. But even just in warehousing and logistics, things like Google Glass. You mentioned the smart devices. Well, let's integrate that into something where I can look at something, see a barcode, give navigation instructions with voice. All on a single wearable device. Very interesting. And then I think the most interesting thing is robotics. If you look at, we've been talking about industrial robots, but they've been kind of dumb and not very mobile. We need smart and mobile in warehousing. We're starting to see it, things like Baxter, the robot. I think within my lifetime, we'll see robots that can do small item picking and move around, or even case picking, even smart AGVs. So that's the area where there's a lot of exciting, things going on right now. I think we're only scratching the surface. So.
Let me ask you about 3D printing. The parts that are needed to develop a product, to print a product, don't they still need to be shipped? I mean, there's this idea that 3D printing at some point in time in the future will displace the warehouse and the distribution center, because it just you can just print on demand rather than store. Mm-hmm. But yet the parts that are needed to make the product still need to be.
Well, it depends. I mean, it's so what NASA's putting on the space station. If you think about service parts, you go into a service parts warehouse. Take automotive. They've got mufflers for 1960 MG. Instead of holding physical inventory for some of those, what if I were able to print that part on demand? So yeah, I'm going to have a printer. I'm going to have materials to do that. Is it going to take over every single part? No, but if I can hold that inventory digitally as blueprints for creating a part versus having a warehouse with, tens of thousands of individual parts, I think it'll have an impact. Now, am I going to do that for high volume parts that I need day in? No. I mean, is there still going to be, cost advantage of mass production? I think it's going to be some of these places either where we want significant mass customization. Saw an example of a company where you could print the cell phone cover on demand, and you had a little, kind of consumer grade, design thing where you could do different pictures, different designs, and then it'd print it for you at that point in time. So I think that's where we're going to see it. It's not going to completely replace mass production where that has significant scale advantages and cost advantage. So I'm not going to 3D print my laundry detergent or something like that. It's going to be for some of these things, but I think it'll impact service parts in some other areas where, hey, if there's potential to hold that digitally instead of having to carry that and take up space for something maybe I sell once a year, that's where I think it might have a bigger impact.
We talked about wearables. We also, whether it be eyewear or watches.
Yep.
Do you see that migrating to the industrial side?
Well, I mean, like I mentioned before, Google Glass, yeah. I mean, I think it's still fairly nascent. They're kind of expensive, but I mean, if you look at how rapidly this technology, think how long's an iPhone been out? It's not that long, and I mean, it's created a whole new industry. I think, integrating voice and visual into some sort of eyewear now that I can have complete, hands-free, but, I could look at a barcode and the system's smart enough to read the barcode, but I'm getting voice instructions all in one technology versus today. I might have a voice headset plus a barcode scanner that I'm carrying around. I think has huge potential. I mean, is this something we're going to see over the next 2 years? Probably not. Over the next 10 years, yeah, I think this technology is going to be, take over in many cases. Okay. So,
Dwight, thank you for your time.
Thank you. I appreciate the time. It was great talking to you.
Thank you.